Welcome to the Black Creator Series, brought to you by Candlewick Press in collaboration with Red Clay Educators. Hosted by Dr. Sonja Cherry-Paul, bringing dynamic books, authors, illustrators, and artists to your classroom and to the world. Look for episodes of the Black Creator Series on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Our guest creator this episode is beloved author and poet, Carole Boston Weatherford. Her body of work is vast and lauded, garnering multiple awards and accolades, among them 2 NAACP Image Awards and 9 American Library Association Youth Media Awards, including a Newbery Honor, the Coretta Scott King Award, and 4 Caldecott Honors. Here's your host, New York Times best-selling author, Dr. Sonja Cherry-Paul, founder of Red Clay Educators, and co-founder of the Institute for Racial Equity in Literacy.
Carole, I'm so excited to talk to you today, specifically about how do you spell unfair. Welcome to the Black Creator Series.
Glad to be back, Sonja.
Yes, I should say welcome back. That's right. When we think about your book, 2 of the people that you dedicate How Do You Spell Unfair to are your mother and your dad. And you share that your mother drilled you for spelling tests and that your dad's spelling dictionary is your, as you call it, well of words. What did these experiences around spelling with your mother and with your dad, what did they teach you beyond learning how to spell words accurately?
Well, both of my parents were educators, so the value of an education was instilled in me from a very early age, and also a love of reading was instilled in me from a very early age. Now, my parents weren't just educators. My father was a printer, so I like to say that I was born with ink in my blood. And as you know, printers, it's very important for printers to get spellings correct. Otherwise, you got a typo and you got to come back and, correct it the next day. And so he was big on spelling. He wasn't a big reader, but he was big on spelling. And my mother was just on top of my schoolwork in general. And so she drilled me, and I remember getting the hundreds on most of my spelling tests. We didn't have spelling bees back in those days, at least not for my all Black school in Baltimore. But I did enjoy spelling, and I can remember bragging to my great aunt, when I was in 2nd grade, that I could spell transportation.
And I want to just share the cover of this book. We will talk about the art and the genius of Frank Morrison during our conversation. But I want to start with the foreword. I love that you include this foreword before the story. It is critical because to understand the experiences of MacNolia Cox, who is the young person that you're writing about, the young speller in Unfair, we need to understand the experience of Marie Bolden, which helps readers begin to understand the context of structural racism in every aspect of Black people's lives, including spelling. So why is it important for educators and young readers to really know that before they engage the story that unfolds after the foreword?
Well, first of all, nowadays, the National Spelling Bee looks like an international, a little, junior United Nations, because they're kids from, representing so many different ethnic groups who are represented. And of course, a couple years ago, Zaila Avant-Garde won the National Spelling Bee and was really the first African American to win the Spelling Bee. However, there was a National Spelling Bee before the Scripps National Spelling Bee, and the first National Spelling Bee was actually won by an African-American girl, Maria Bolden, from New Orleans. And when she returned home, the newspapers, of course, New Orleans, you've got voodoo practitioners in New Orleans, a lot of mysticism in that area. And white people began to say that, in fact, the newspapers down there said that she only won because she had bewitched the white contestants. She was so I guess so magical, so mystical, so exotic, that they couldn't think of how to spell in her presence. So that's how they kind of negated her
Mhm.
win. Booker T. Washington, however, saw her win as a sign of progress, of Black progress.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
just feel like that forward, it's so critical for educators and students to read that because it just sets the tone and provides the backdrop for this story. So tell us about MacNolia Cox. How did her story come to you?
Her story actually came to me through the work of another poet, A. Jordan, who wrote a book called Magnolia, and I think it came out in the early aughts, as they say. So I think may have come out in 2005 or something, but it was an adult poetry book about Magnolia Cox. There were poems about some of her contemporaries as well in that collection, but it's a magnificent collection, and that was my introduction to Magnolia Cox. Um, and of course, many years later, I thought about her again, and I said, her story should be told for children. The volume that A. Van Jordan wrote is an adult poetry volume, and it won, I think it won some awards. He's a fantastic poet. At any rate, I wanted to write her story for children, and rather than consulting his book, Magnolia, again, I decided to do all the research for myself.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I mean, when an event is sponsored by newspapers, there's a wealth of information because they documented every step of the way, not just Magnolia's advancement, but the advancement of other contestants from other local areas. And then, every word that was spelled or misspelled was in the newspaper because newspapers had, of course, sponsored the contest. So there was a wealth of information.
As you mentioned earlier, as we think about Magnolia Cox, we must think about Marie Bolden because this denial of Black excellence goes back to, we can trace this back to the young poet Phyllis Wheatley, right? Who white people believed couldn't possibly have the intelligence to think critically, to express complex feelings, and to write poetry. So from Phyllis Wheatley to Marie Bolden, who white people, as you said, claimed defeated her competitors because they were so distracted by her presence, to Magnolia Cox, who young readers learn in your story, in your book, that, they see the judges giving her harder words than all of the other spellers, words that weren't even on the official list, to Black children today who have been accused on cheating on tests when they score higher than their white peers, or who've ever just had their brilliance invalidated whenever it didn't uphold white norms and standards. So in what ways is unfair not only the story of Magnolia Cox, but of the denial of Black excellence? And what can educators learn from this? What can young Black readers learn from this?
Well, I think one thing educators should learn is not to bring their preconceived notions about um, the abilities of children of color to the classroom. Teachers need to have high expectations of all their students, regardless of their learning styles and regardless of their ability levels. And their gifts. Teachers need to hold high expectations of children. So I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Did that ever happen to you?
So it didn't happen to me, but it happened to my daughter in
Okay.
a
Okay.
physics class. And it wasn't her teacher, it was a substitute teacher who was administering a test and assumed that my daughter was cheating. She was one of
Hmm.
two Black students in the classroom. And luckily, and told my daughter that she was going to tell the teacher that she had cheated. She was going to make sure the principal knew, et cetera, et cetera. And luckily, when her teacher came back, he said, not her.
Hmm.
Maybe if you had told me about somebody else in this class, but definitely not her, right? So in that case, she was, her teacher affirmed who she was. But I know of other stories from other writers who have written about, taking a test and being accused of cheating because their scores are higher than others. And so for me, unfair is an opportunity for Black readers to trace that history of their brilliance being denied and to
Right,
see
right,
what their ancestors have had to go through and to know, even in the face of that, that they are brilliant, that
right.
they
Well,
can be triumphant.
yeah. Well, one of the greatest threats to white supremacy is Black excellence and Black
Mhm.
advancement. And I asked you the question, and so I'm going to answer it for myself. Well, yes, it happened to me. I was in eighth grade. I had written a paper about County Cullen because I was so moved by his poem. And I may have told you this before, Sonia.
Mm,
I was so moved by his poem, Incident, which is set in Baltimore, which is my hometown. And he had been called the N word, and the poem, the narrator had been called the N word. And I was so moved by that poem that I decided to do my Harlem Renaissance project on County Cullen. And so I
mm,
wrote the paper, handed it in to my eighth grade teacher at this exclusive private school where I was the only Black student at my grade level who had come from public school. There were four Black students, all female, but I was the only one who had come from public school. And the teacher returned my paper with two things written on it: the grade B in red and a question: did you write this?
mm,
He just couldn't believe
mm-mm,
that one, a Black student, and two, a Black student from public who had transferred in from public school could have written a paper that good. Now, I didn't realize that at the time, that was why I had a B. But I later came to realize that that the grade reflected his expectation of me rather than my performance.
mm.
And that is something that, students, I had no idea what was going on at the time. I knew about prejudice, but I didn't know that I was being victimized
Right,
at the time. I
right.
just assumed that, okay, something was wrong with the paper that he couldn't articulate.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it continues to happen. It
Mhm.
continues to happen.
I am so enamored by Frank Morrison's art because it just captures, so much, some of the feelings we've been talking about, just not understanding, this denial of Black excellence, as well as just the love and the pride of Black people. And for you, I wanted to ask, what does his art communicate to you across this book? Because these are some of, I just flagged a few of my favorites, which was hard to do because it's Frank Morrison, right? But what does his art communicate to you across this story?
Well, I think it shows the pride, not only that Magnolia felt, but also the pride that her community felt
Yeah.
as a result of her achievement.
Hmm.
His artwork is very emotive, I think,
Hmm.
and also it's also very animated. And
Mm,
there's a depth, I think, to his artwork that makes you want to linger.
yes. You can
And I
feel,
love collaborating with Frank.
yeah. I love when you both collaborate. You can feel the dehumanization, you know,
Right, right. You
here.
can.
And you feel the love as you explained. And you also feel the pride. It's like, I will not let them rob me of my own sense of self,
Right,
right?
right,
You can almost imagine the mom telling Magnolia, you hold your head up and you put your
right,
shoulders back.
right, right. You can.
In the epilogue, you provide more of the history about around discrimination and segregation. And you lead readers to Zelia Avant-Garde, who you mentioned,
Right.
the first African American to win the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 2021, which is also, as you explained to readers, the same year that the US Senate passed a resolution honoring MacNolia Cox's life, legacy, and achievements, right? Um,
Right. Right.
this history is so important, and yet there are those who believe that it isn't, that, for example, the Scripps National Spelling Bee's actions of the past simply emerged from the social, protocols of its time. So no need to revisit this past history or linger around it. And yet we are in this national moment where, Black history and courses are being erased from curriculum, from schools, from universities. What are you noticing, Carole, about the erasure of Black history? And does that drive you as an author, as a creator? Um, what can educators do to push back against this? What are your thoughts about where we are in this national moment?
Well, my mission has ever since I've been writing children's books has been to mine the past for family stories, fading traditions, and forgotten struggles. And I've added to that in recent years uh, struggles that center Black resilience, resistance, remarkability, rejoicing, and remembrance. So my mission has not changed.
Mhm.
The climate we're living, the political climate has changed. But my mission has remained the same, and I plan to stick with that mission.
Mhm.
Um, of course, efforts to erase our history, to not teach our history are by design because our history is empowering, not only for us, but for society in general. The more we know about our own history, the better equipped we are to meet the challenges of the future, of today and of the future.
Mhm.
So, you have to think that if this is information that they don't want us to have, it
Mhm.
must be mighty precious.
Mhm.
It must be really, really important information if they don't want us to have it. So I think what teachers have to do is what they've been doing all along. They need to be the experts. They are the experts about how to educate children. And thus, they need to educate themselves. One thing I've found about my books is often they're doing double duty
Yep.
because the curriculum has not been inclusive. We have not learned much about the Black past, much about the African American past, or about people of color in general. Um, and so, what I find is that children are not only learning about MacNolia Cox when they read How You Spell Unfair, but so are adults in their lives. So are the teachers. So the teachers need to continue reading the books even if they can't teach the books,
Mhm.
and they have to then become the book in some way to share the knowledge when at the appropriate time. Many teachers are also parents, and they can participate. We have to have community reading programs, from the home to the church to in barbershops, beauty shops, sororities, fraternities. We've got to do the work in our community. We can't expect other people to teach us about ourselves, and and we've known that forever.
Right.
We've known that forever. They should. The public schools have an obligation to do that.
Mhm.
But we know that the onus is really going to be on us. We've got to teach our own children. We've got to learn our own history and pass it down within our community.
Yeah,
And then the children know it. They know it when they get to school.
that's right. That's right. And for teachers who really want to do better with this, I always say that your books are curriculum. Honestly, there should be courses for pre-service teachers and in teacher education programs with literally just your books alone, and
Oh, thank
teachers
you.
reading them and discussing them with, then when they get into the classroom and they're handed some curriculum, they'll know exactly how to interrupt erasure because it will be like, no, 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 I've learned this. And while it may not be in this curriculum that has been handed to me, I know exactly how to make sure that it is included and that it is not omitted. So I am hoping that, teachers, as you say, understand the double duty of your books. They are stories for young readers, but they are also, history lessons for educators. What can readers look forward to next, Carole? Do you have any projects coming up that you can share?
Well, I've got two other books coming out from Candlewick in the early part of 2024. The first one I think is going to be Bros, Bros, and it's not a historical book. It's a contemporary realistic. I guess it would be fiction because the characters. It's just a situation where young boys are playing in their community and they have a day of fun together in their community, and they're safe. They're affirmed, and it's a happy story.
Yeah.
And it's for ages 4 to 8. It's picture book illustrated by Reggie Brown. I think that's his name. The other book that I have coming out is a collaboration with Eric Velasquez, another of my favorite illustrators, and it's called Outspoken Paul Robeson Ahead of His Time, a one-man show. And it will probably also qualify as my longest title.
Wow.
And so it's a biography in verse.
That is so exciting.
And Eric's work is just luminous for that book.
Exactly. And not only is he a brilliant illustrator, he also is a little researcher and historian,
Right.
on in his own right, and not a little a researcher and historian in his own right. I mean, I learn so much every time I talk to him.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's wonderful. We pretty much started out at the same time in the industry.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can't wait for them. Carole, you've spent decades researching, preserving, and sharing stories about Black people, our histories, our triumphs, challenges, joys, stories that might otherwise be ignored or omitted are accessible to young readers because of your dedication, your care, your passion, your love, your talents. What does it mean to you to be a Black creator?
Well, it means one, being blessed to be able to share my gift and to share what I have learned and have been inspired by with young people. So to me it's a huge responsibility. It's a privilege, and it's a blessing to be able to do this work.
Yeah. Thank you, Carole.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Black Creators Series, a Candlewick Press and Red Clay Educators collaboration. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notifications button so you won't miss an episode. For more information about the Black Creators Series, go to blackcreatorseries.candlewick.com or sonjacherrypaul.com, or go to Red Clay Ed on Twitter and Instagram.